Imagine a man so rich, his daily earnings exceed what most people won't make in 10 lifetimes. Private jets? Old news. This man had his own space station, a team of over 200 elite bodyguards, AI-powered surveillance, and underground vaults guarded by biometric locks. His name? Victor Kraus, the wealthiest man in the world. But even all that wasn't enough. Because in the middle of this billion-dollar fortress, working quietly in the shadows, was a security guard. No military background, no hacking experience, no criminal record. A man so invisible, no one noticed him. Until it was too late. That man stole $1 billion in a single night and vanished, leaving no trace behind. Not a fingerprint, not a face on a camera, not even a name. This is the story of how it happened. Victor Kraus, the man who owned the future. Victor Kraus wasn't just rich, he was powerful. The kind of powerful that made presidents nervous. Born in Berlin, raised in Silicon Valley, he built his fortune through tech, AI, energy, and eventually global defense contracts. His companies powered cities, his drones patrolled borders, his algorithms ran half the financial systems in Asia and Europe. He lived in a private estate known as the Citadel, located on a cliffside in Norway, protected by electromagnetic shields, underground bunkers, and 24/7 armed patrols. His closest assistants were scanned, tracked, and vetted by government-level security. He trusted no one, except his machines. Everything in the Citadel was automated. Doors didn't use keys, they used retinal scans. Conversation rooms were soundproof and monitored by AI for threats. Even the toilets were encrypted. Yes, really. The entire estate ran on Sentient, his private artificial intelligence network capable of monitoring every inch of the property and making decisions faster than any human security team ever could. Or so he thought. The guard. Just another face. His name was Daniel Ramirez, 34 years old, ex-hotel staff, with a spotless record and zero signs of ambition. He wasn't a genius. He wasn't a criminal. He didn't even apply for the job. He was placed there by a contractor who never existed on paper. For 3 years, Daniel worked the night shift, 7 p.m. to 7 a.m. No questions, no complaints, no attention, just another uniform in the background. But what nobody knew was that Daniel had been watching, listening, and learning. He noticed the patterns, the timing of guard rotations, the blind spots in the AI's field of view, the sound the vault made when it didn't fully seal. He studied the cleaning robots, the door mechanisms, even the delivery schedules. He wasn't waiting for the right moment. He was creating the moment. Everything changed. It happened on a Thursday, at exactly 2:17 a.m. A maintenance drone failed, a minor glitch. Cameras blinked, lights flickered. For 86 seconds, a section of the estate went dark. By the time the system rebooted, Daniel Ramirez was gone. And so was $1 billion, transferred through a secure channel that only 2 people on Earth were supposed to have access to, Victor Kraus and his chief of security. But both men were asleep. What was stolen wasn't cash or gold. It was crypto, moved through an untraceable transaction across 6 continents, using hidden access codes buried in the AI's emergency protocol files that had never been opened, until that night. The aftermath, no alarms, no clues. When security reviewed the footage, there was nothing. The cameras never saw his face. His name was Daniel Ramirez, age 34. Salary, $2,400 a month. Job title, night shift security guard. Location, the Citadel, the most secure private estate on Earth. At first glance, Daniel was a nobody. Just another quiet man in a pressed uniform, badge clipped to his chest, thermos of cheap coffee in one hand, tablet in the other. He didn't talk much, didn't joke around with other guards, didn't stay late or show any special interest in the billionaire he worked for. And that's what made him dangerous. Because while others were asleep, distracted, or bored, Daniel was always watching, listening, memorizing. He had the eyes of a man with no distractions, no family photos, no phone calls during breaks, no social media. If someone had looked closer, they might have asked questions, but no one ever did. Why would they? He passed every background check, showed up on time, followed every rule. But beneath that calm, boring surface was a mind that saw through systems like glass, a hidden genius. Daniel wasn't trained in cybersecurity, he'd never gone to college, but what he had was far more dangerous: time, and a brain wired for patterns. From the age of 11, Daniel had been obsessed with puzzles, not the cardboard kind, but systems. Subway maps, computer menus, ATM interfaces, traffic lights. Anything that moved according to rules fascinated him. He used to stand in line at banks just to watch how the cameras were positioned. Not because he wanted to rob them, but because he wanted to know how they thought someone might try. He never saw himself as a criminal. He saw himself as an observer, an analyst, a student of systems built by people richer and more arrogant than him. By the time he was 18, Daniel was writing his own code. Not flashy apps or games, tools, quiet programs that could slip into a network and sit there, invisible, collecting information. He never used them, never needed to, until he got hired at the Citadel. The perfect cover. Getting into the Citadel wasn't easy. The job had 9 rounds of vetting, psychological profiling, biometric analysis, and even a deep family background check. But Daniel had prepared for years. His name, his resume, his references, all constructed to look just believable enough. Not spotless, not suspicious, just average. He passed the screening in silence. Every interview, every scan, every question, answered calmly and consistently. Once inside, he never broke protocol, never got close to the inner circle. He worked the outer zones, mostly monitoring entry points, patrolling blind spots, and logging drone activity. He became a piece of furniture. That's what made him so effective, because over the course of 3 years, Daniel built the most important thing anyone could build in a place like that: trust through invisibility. The planning begins. Daniel didn't rush. He observed. Every night, while guards played poker or nodded off at their screens, Daniel studied Sentient, the billionaire's advanced AI surveillance system. He noted its language patterns, how it flagged movement, how it reset itself. He started mapping blind spots in real time, noticing where drones hesitated, where signal latency dropped by milliseconds. He learned how deliveries were logged, when human overrides kicked in, and what protocols were triggered during power fluctuations. He wasn't just planning a robbery, he was dissecting a machine. And all the while, no one noticed him, because Daniel Ramirez wasn't the kind of thief who kicked in doors or pointed guns. He was the kind that made you say, after it was all over, "Wait, wasn't he just the security guard?" By the time most people thought Daniel Ramirez had settled into a routine, he was already 18 months into a quiet obsession, mapping the Citadel from the inside out, not physically, digitally. While his coworkers patrolled halls and stared at thermal monitors, Daniel was cataloging data, not stealing it, not moving it, just watching, like a scientist observing a living organism. Sentient, the AI that ran Victor Krause's private estate, was more than just surveillance. It was predictive, reactive. It learned human behavior and adjusted responses in real time. Most people believed it was flawless, capable of stopping any threat before it even began. But Daniel had a theory: anything created by humans has a pattern, and anything with a pattern can be understood. And once it can be understood, it can be broken. The first clue: redundancy. It started with something small. One night, a storm knocked out part of the estate's external power grid. Backup generators kicked in immediately. To most people, this was routine. But Daniel noticed that during the power transfer, Sentient briefly handed over control of certain subsystems to local manual nodes, including one that handled crypto asset vaults stored in cold storage servers, only for 9 seconds. Then, full control reverted to the AI. That was it. 9 seconds, no alarms, no flags. But to Daniel, it was a crack in the armor. The second clue: human fallbacks. Victor Krause didn't trust people. But ironically, it was human failsafes that made his system vulnerable. For example, in the event of AI malfunction or false positive lockdowns, Krauss had installed manual override codes, encrypted sequences buried deep in isolated emergency systems. These weren't connected to the internet. They weren't meant to be accessed remotely. Only 3 people knew they existed: Krauss, his CTO, and his chief of security. But Daniel had seen the CTO once, in a panic, at 3 a.m., using a hidden terminal behind a wall panel buried in sublevel 2. He watched him input a sequence that overrode the AI's crypto transfer protocols. The system was supposed to erase logs of those overrides. But Daniel had his own software running silently in the background, logging every keystroke. It took 6 months to reconstruct the full code. He tested it on dummy environments built on his personal encrypted laptop. It worked. The third clue: timing. Now came the hardest part: finding the perfect moment. Daniel realized that once every quarter, the Citadel performed a full system reboot for AI optimization. During this reboot, Sentient's decision-making system went offline for exactly 86 seconds, while data was shuffled across its backup clusters. During those 86 seconds, the system couldn't track inconsistencies or flag unusual behaviors. That window was tiny, too small for most people to do anything with, but not for Daniel. With the override codes, precise system maps, and timing of the reboot cycle, he could trigger a phantom asset transfer, one that would appear internally like a maintenance function. The transfer wouldn't raise alerts because it would be coded to look like an internal backup movement. The final piece: disappearance. He didn't just plan to steal the money, he planned to erase himself from the system entirely. His ID badge would be cloned and swapped with a decoy, his uniform replaced with one that didn't have tracking RFID, and his final logout would be backdated through an internal API exploit he'd tested 14 times without being noticed. When he walked out of the Citadel, there would be no digital trace of him ever having been there. Daniel didn't just find a loophole. He built a bridge through it. And on the night of the reboot, he would cross that bridge carrying $1 billion. All he had to do now was wait. Date: March 3rd. Time: 2:13 a.m. Location: the Citadel, Norway. Outside, snow fell like silence. Inside, the world's most advanced security system, Sentient, was preparing for its quarterly reboot. Just another routine cycle. Engineers would sleep through it. Guards wouldn't even notice. The billionaire, Victor Krauss, was in Dubai on a private yacht, unreachable by any conventional signal. But Daniel Ramirez was wide awake and ready. He didn't carry a gun. He didn't wear gloves. He wasn't running or sneaking because he didn't need to. He had already turned the building into a blindfolded machine. 2:14 a.m. The reboot begins. Sentient initiated its full system reboot. For 86 seconds, its AI intelligence core would go completely dark. Emergency systems would remain on, but pattern recognition, behavioral analysis, and anomaly detection would be offline, completely blind. Daniel walked into the cold storage access bay like any other night. His fake badge, perfectly cloned with the CTO's override clearance, led him through the first biometric lock. The retinal scanner blinked red, then turned green. He was in. 2:15 a.m. The vault terminal. The crypto vault was not a physical space full of gold bars. It was a hardened server farm located underground. It stored hundreds of Victor Krauss's digital assets, crypto coins, tokenized real estate, offshore encrypted funds, totaling over $8.2 billion. But Daniel wasn't greedy. He didn't want it all. He just wanted one clean transfer, $1 billion, moved through shadow ledgers into wallets he'd created across 5 nations, each protected by layers of anonymized transactions. He plugged in a drive the size of a coin, a device he'd built himself, never connected to the internet. It injected the override protocol silently, bypassing logging and masking the transaction as a system file defragmentation. In less than 14 seconds, the transaction executed. $1 billion gone. Moved to a location that didn't technically exist. 2:16 a.m. Erasing the trail. Now came the part that separated amateurs from ghosts. Daniel ran his erasure protocol. His system badge was deleted from the active log. His last movement, according to cameras, showed him leaving the facility an hour ago. His workstation login was overwritten to match another guard who was currently asleep in the security bay. He didn't just delete his presence, he replaced it. No missing pieces, no red flags. 2:17 a.m., walk out like nothing happened. By the time Sentient came back online at 2:18 a.m., Daniel was already on a shuttle headed for a routine maintenance supply run, one he had scheduled and approved using a terminal days prior under a forged system admin profile. No one stopped him, no one looked twice, because, officially, he wasn't even there. He passed through 5 perimeter scans, 1 drone checkpoint, and 2 AI-authenticated gates, all blind to what had just occurred, all still rebooting their logs. 3:12 a.m., gone by sunrise, Daniel Ramirez was on a private jet under a fake name. Time, 3:12 a.m. Location, 41,000 feet above the North Atlantic passenger, unknown. Daniel Ramirez, or the man once known by that name, was already gone. On board a private charter jet registered under the name Leon Navarro, he sipped coffee in silence while watching the snow-covered curvature of Europe fade behind him. The plane wasn't headed to a vacation spot. It was going somewhere no one would think to look, and more importantly, somewhere no one could touch him. Because while the Citadel's security systems were still rebooting, and Victor Krause's team scrambled to figure out what had gone missing, Daniel was already executing Phase 2, disappearance. Step 1. The death of Daniel Ramirez. 12 hours after the heist, a car exploded in the Norwegian mountains. Inside were remnants of a fake ID, bones from a stolen cadaver, and enough DNA planted from Daniel's own discarded toothbrushes to fool even high-level forensic analysts. The authorities concluded it was an accident. The local news ran a single headline: Night shift guard dies in freak car fire outside Oslo. Closed case. No foul play suspected, no autopsy requested, just ashes and paperwork. Daniel Ramirez was officially dead. Step 2. Identity reinvention. Long before the heist, Daniel had been preparing for this moment. Over the years, he created 3 separate identities, each built on real people who had died young with no digital footprint. He didn't just change his name, he changed his history, medical records, school transcripts, bank accounts, a complete life, ready to activate, like a costume waiting to be worn. Now he became Alexander Mirov, a reclusive crypto investor from Montenegro with dual citizenship and a history of offshore business ventures, most of which existed only in encrypted files and backup servers in countries that don't ask questions. He had backup passports, decentralized wallets, burner phones, and exit strategies for at least 6 scenarios. But none of them were needed. His original plan had worked perfectly. Step 3. The country with no extradition. Daniel's final destination was a lush, mountainous republic nestled between Central Asia and the Middle East, a quiet, independent state with no extradition treaty and a history of sheltering political dissidents, warlords, and exiled billionaires. There, under the name Mirov, he purchased a private villa under a shell corporation. The property sat on the edge of a remote lake, surrounded by forest, accessible only by boat or helicopter. The local government didn't care who he was. As long as the wire transfers cleared, and they always did, he was just another ghost living in paradise. Step 4. Vanishing from the digital world. In a world of face recognition and global tracking, disappearing isn't about hiding. It's about overwhelming the system with false trails. Daniel's final move was to bury himself in noise. He used his fake identities to generate online activity in 6 different countries simultaneously. One booked a yacht in Singapore, another bought property in Uruguay, a third opened a tech startup in Nairobi, all fake, all automated, all leading investigators in circles. Meanwhile, Daniel, now Alexander, spent his mornings kayaking across a silent lake, his days investing in cryptocurrencies through shell accounts, and his nights reading books by candlelight. He didn't gloat, he didn't post, he didn't even celebrate. Because true success, in Daniel's world, wasn't about headlines. It was about disappearing without a trace. Final note. To this day, Victor Krause's team has never recovered the billion. Interpol has no suspect. The cameras never saw his face. And the man known as Daniel Ramirez? He died before anyone even knew what he was planning.